1966. A young man of 17 ventures to his place of work in a factory somewhere in the West Midlands. Normal day, but one of his workmates is called in sick. So his foreman, I guess, boss says, could you cover his shift? Do his job. So he's like, fine, I'll do that. But the safety procedures, the health and safety, isn't what it should be. And it's some kind of metal press. And in the motion of putting his hands in to operate the machinery, it comes down and takes the top of these two fingers off. Now that's a horrible thing to happen. Horrible thing to happen to anyone. Potentially a tragedy for this young man because he's a guitar player and he's lost the top of his two fingertips for his fretting hand. But from tragedy, a great rising will happen. A massive triumph. Because that man is Tony Iommi and he will fucking invent heavy metal. Okay, comes 1969, by then he's fashioned fingertips. He's adapted his playing style. And obviously he uses these two fingers a lot, which limits the kind of chord shapes you can play. So you can hold down a two-shaped figure really easily. A root and a fifth, and he can move that around. At this point, heavy music up to this point is Cream, Jimi Hendrix Experience, Jeff Beck Group, and over in America maybe I'm Butterfly, Vanilla Fudge, they maybe heard Blue Cheer. Okay, it's heavy, but it's not as heavy, and it's not as heavy as it's going to be. Prior to this, briefly, the band he's been in is called Earth, and he's with three other guys in that band. One is Bill Ward, one is Terry Geezer Butler, and the other one is one John Michael Osborne or Ozzy Osbourne. And they changed their name based on, I think it's a Mario Bava film that Geezer Butler is into, and they changed their name to Black Sabbath. And I think it's October, I'm just checking my notes here, on the 16th of October 1969. So at this point, Led Zeppelin's first album's out. I think the Brown Bomber Led Zeppelin 2 is probably about to drop. So that's kind of as heavy as it's getting there. They venture into the studio, and in one day they redefine what music is, they redefine the culture, and they record the first Black Sabbath album. It's dropped, it's released on February the 13th, 1970. So let's start there and let's have a trawl through the Osbourne era of Black Sabbath albums. Sorry for my dramatic introduction, but I think it is that important. So what I think of this album, here it is back to front, incredible album cover, one of the great album covers. So spooky. I think it's a fledgling masterpiece, and what I mean by that is its legacy will always be assured because it's the first kind of true heavy metal album. Although heavy metal's not really invented totally properly by then, I think the word heavy metal's kind of decided on sometime in 78, 79, and certainly by New Wobbum, and probably defined by Judas Priest's British Steel album. But this is as heavy as it gets, and every band will kind of look to this at the time. I think the first four tracks are what is the kind of core that the album's built on. You got Black Sabbath, the classic, with the tritone, the Devil's Interval, NIB, with the Wizard's Next, with a brilliant harmonica. Again, showing the blues influence. When they were in Earth, they did a lot of kind of blues jams and that, and there is still some of that element in this album. Behind the Wall of Sleep, which is not as well known track, but that's really good, great riff. And then it finishes with NIB, which is one of the all-time great bass riffs, and that was side one. Side two on the original vinyl only had 3 tracks: Evil Woman, Sleeping Village, and The Warning. This CD adds Wicked World on as well. So side two's not as strong. Evil Woman's a cover. It's kind of more poppy, I suppose, if you can call it that. It was like a single, I think. But I like it. Then you got Sleeping Village, which is kind of a little short acoustic intro, uses what's a minor 9 chord, a minor add 9 chord, which will become beloved by many metal bands. And a good example would be Welcome Home Sanitarium by Metallica. And that's it's got a bit of vocals from Ozzy, almost spoken word. and then there's an instrumental sort of section to it. So that's quite cool. Then you've got the warning. Now, I didn't know this is a cover. It was done by the Ainsley Dunbar Retaliation. You can check it out online. I really like the sort of music vocal part of this track. It kind of goes off just in a kind of blues jamming and a long unaccompanied solo, and it lasts about 10 minutes. And the album finishes with Wicked World again, which was on the American release, and again it's a little more commercial, probably for a 7-inch. So in terms of musical history, it's a 10 out of 10. If I was marking out of 10, I'd give it a 7 or an 8. And some people might not agree with that. The production's really raw. It is literally, the guys in the studio. But it does introduce something that Iommi does, where he'll solo on one channel and play off himself on the other. I'm just looking at my notes here. Yeah, the age of the guys when they do this is they're all 21, apart from Geezer, who's 20. So, pretty incredible. So that follows up later in the year. I'll just check my date, September 18th, they made this album, Paranoid. There it is, Battlefront, shit cover. I'll be honest about this album. It's an all-time classic. It sold 4 million copies in America. I should just say Black Sabbath went platinum eventually, and that made number 23. It just came out of nowhere and went to number 23 in the American charts, I think number 8 in Britain. Amazing achievement. I think this album is a classic, but I've just heard it and I've heard the songs too many times. It's not an album I go to that often. It opens with War Pigs, brilliant track, great lyric. Heard it loads of times. Paranoid, the title track, written at the end of the studio session because they needed another track. Their most famous track, but not one of their best tracks in my opinion. Then you got Planet Caravan, it's a great sort of ballad, slightly with a lovely kind of jazzy solo. Tony Iommi sort of mirroring his great idol Django Reinhardt. And then it finishes with Iron Man, another track. It's great, but I've heard it too many times. Side 2 opens with Electric Funeral, which is kind of quite jazzy in a rock way. I should say, like, Sabbath have a lot of jazz influence. Bill Ward puts a lot of swing into stuff. Hand of Doom. Now this is the deep cut I really like on this album. You can imagine Soundgarden doing it, in the 90s with Chris Cornell singing. Then you got the instrumental Rat Salad, which is alright, and then another classic, Fairies Wear Boots, which you do hear quite a lot on classic rock radio. So there's not as much to dig into here. If you buy Best of Black Sabbath, typically I'll have 5 tracks off this album. When I tell you something like with this, when as a kid, like we had the NEMS reissue of this album in gatefold sleeve, and for some reason we had it on the back shelf of our mum and dad's mini Metro. Like you might remember the mini Metro. We had a metallic blue one. End of British Leyland classic, Austin Morris or whatever. But we had it on the back shelf, and everyone knows if vinyl's exposed to the sun it'll warp. But for some reason we just left it on the back shelf. It wasn't like, oh, should we bring in the Paranoid album? It must have been there a few days, and it got wrecked. But I think the reason was, although we enjoyed the album, we just weren't. It just kind of, once you'd listened to it X amount of times, that was enough. And I still feel the same. It's not an album I reach for as much. Okay, so next album they do, I think the first 3 albums kind of form a trilogy. They're basically bass, drums, guitar, vocals. There's very little overdubbing. I think Iommi might start kind of double tracking his guitars on this album. But I think this is their first masterpiece for me. This is Master Reality. So I first had this on vinyl back in 81. I got it in a bargain bin for £1.49. It was a NEMS cutout. So when you had import albums and overpressed and they got sent over to different countries and sold on the cheap. Opens with Sweet Leaf with Ozzy coughing. It's fucking brilliant. One of his best ever vocals. Then you got After Forever, which is a brilliant lyric by Geezer, sort of questioning organised religion. And that's something Sabbath did really well. They started all these tropes in metal lyrics, some science fiction, Satanism, black magic, but also political lyrics like War Pigs, anti-war, this anti-religion, the types of lyrics that bands like Metallica, Slayer and the ilk would, dine out on over the years. Then you've got the short instrumental Embryo. So again, this album's only really got 6 tracks because there's another short instrumental. Then Children of the Grave, another classic. I think the time signature feel on this, the 12/8, the triplets, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, again, hugely influential, used by countless bands. Orchid, the other instrumental, then Lord of This World, I think it's one of Iommi's best riffs, brilliant. Then Solitude, which is the ballad, it's kind of like Planet Caravan Part 2, but with a really spooky, haunting vocal by Ozzy. And then Into the Void finishes it, which is one of the all-time great fucking, down-tuned riffs. I think Iommi down-tuned 3 semitones on this album. So look, Into the Void is one of the heaviest riffs ever. It is that weird thing, it's only 34 minutes long, but what a 34 minutes. So that's my favourite of the initial run of these albums. I think Bill Ward, what you notice is Bill Ward's got incredible power in his drumming. He's right up there with John Bonham. He's fast up top like Pace. He's underrated, really. And he's got this incredible feel, which I think's, John Bonham aside, is probably unmatched in the early days of sort of rock and heavy music. Iommi's the riff master. His solo's a little too freeform for me. There's not as much structure. If you've seen my Ronnie Dio video, you'll know that I'm a really big admirer of his solos from the Heaven and Hell Mob Rules era, and there's more structure. Geezer Butler, what can you say? He plays in unison with Iommi and he goes off on one. His lyrics are great. And then Ozzy's vocal style, he's kind of like, I think his biggest influences are Lennon, McCartney. Lennon, he's kind of got this psychedelic swirl about his voice. That I think he gets from Lennon. And then McCartney, if you imagine like McCartney's kind of rock vocal on a track like Sgt. Pepper's, I think that's where Ozzy's getting that from. I think where he doesn't fit in with the pattern is typically you've got rock singers, you can sort of split them into kind of 4 or 5 groups even, but back then you've got your kind of bluesy guy in the higher register like Plant. Now Ozzy can get up into the higher registers. Then you got your Paul Rodgers, who's a bit more relaxed. Ozzy's not like that. Ian Gillan, again, does high screams, he's kind of bluesy. But Ozzy doesn't have much blues about his voice. When he does bluesy stuff in Sabbath, it just doesn't sound that bluesy. Because his vocal tone just isn't like that. But that's what makes him stand out, what makes him unique. And I think he offers a good kind of bridge for a lot of metal singers where you don't have to be the best singer, but you can give it a go. And I think that's what that's a real inspirational thing that Ozzy does. Next album, 1972, but this time, they've had 3 platinum albums. They record this over in America. First 3 albums are produced by Roger Bain, who's kind of the metal producer of the time. I think he does the first Budgie album, does the first Judas Priest. It's the other thing, there's just no such thing as a heavy metal producer. But the band produced themselves for the Volume 4 album. Now for some people this is their best album or second best. I've tried sort of getting more into it. I've tried loving it as much. But I just don't. It just doesn't do it for me quite as much. I think it's more of a collection of songs than a whole. Bells and Wheels of Confusion, which has got a really cool melody from Ozzy. But it's got a kind of a middle section I'm not as keen on. Then Tomorrow's Dream, which is really good, really catchy. Then the ballad changes, which is I like. I've probably heard it a bit too many times, but it's a really effective vocal by Ozzy. Effects, that's just Tony Iommi messing around naked, apparently high on drugs. So I'm not into that. Track 5, side 1 on the original vinyl, finished with Supernaut, which is brilliant. Got a great kind of wah-wah riff by Iommi. And he's bringing in a different sort of tempo and groove. Bill Ward's flying on that one. Side 2 opens with Snowblind, an absolute classic. This was the B-side of the reissue of the Paranoid single, so when the new album hit, they reissued the Paranoid single, and this track was the B-side. It's brilliant. Then the sort of album, the next track's quite interesting. I'm just going to refer to my notes. So track 7's Cornucopia. I had to look up what that was a few years ago, and the cornucopia is kind of where it's like harvest and where there's objects of food and that in a building, I suppose, back in the day it'd be in some kind of shed or barn or cave, I don't know, but he's basically attacking shopping malls, Geezer Butler, which is interesting. If you think about a film like Dawn of the Dead, it's kind of predating that horror idea of the shopping mall and the zombies. So this starts with a really doomy riff, and it's a really cool track. Then you've got another little Iommi instrumental. So this is something he started with Master Reality, onwards, Laguana Sunrise, and it's nice little piece, with a lovely string arrangement. So I like that. Then the last two tracks are kind of strange. Some Vitius Dance. It's kind of got a jolly riff, but it doesn't go anywhere for me. It's only about 2.5 minutes long. And then Under the Sun is a track, the final track that they've played live on the last tour. And I do like that. It's got a kind of cool 12/8 type of triple-E riff. So I like this album. I mean, I was marking the albums out of 10, wasn't I? You know, I was kind of saying the first one's 7 or an 8. Master Reality's a 9. Paranoid, 7. Maybe an 8. I suppose this one for me kind of feels like a 6, between 6 and 7, but a lot of people would disagree with that. It's got some great stuff on it. I think one of the things I'm not as keen on is the production. It's kind of got a trashy high end to it. But I think maybe because I never heard it when I was younger, I don't know. Having said that, the next album I'm about to get out, I didn't get till later on. I first saw a copy of Volume 4 actually. I was around a mate of my brother's when I was about 9 or 10, and he had Volume 4, and it had the cool gatefold with the fold-out pictures. So I actually got this album on vinyl back in early 92, 93, and Sabbath released album. I think this is maybe the best album. Brilliant cover. If you're not aware, that's by a guy called Drew Struzan, and he did all the great Indiana Jones, Back to the Future posters, stuff like that. So this is where they get experimental, but still keep the core Sabbath sound. It starts off with Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, probably one of their greatest songs. I think spectacular vocal by Ozzy on this. He's hitting really high notes. I think he had to drop in a lot on it, but he puts real aggression and rage into it. You know, full props to his singing. Now you got National Acrobat, another great track. Fluff, another nice Iommi instrumental, maybe a little long. I think it's about 4.5 minutes, but it's really cool. Then it finishes with Zabracadabra. I think Metallica have covered this. Again, it's got quite a cool groove, bringing out some of the jazzy feel. Great bass by Geezer. Killing Yourself to Live, another great track, and it's Geezer's lyrics are ranting about the management, the Mehans, who were ripping off the band. Then Who Are You? I think Ozzy came up with a keyboard line for this, and it's a synth. And I like the track. It's not a great track, but it's got interesting vocal melody, harmonies. Again, it's an experiment that works and offers an interesting deep cut. Then Looking for Today, this has got a kind of more poppy side to it, and this will kind of show where they're going to go. And I really like the track. I think this type of track is what will cause problems for them down the line when people think they're losing the heaviest, but it's a really good album track. And then it finished with me, what I think is probably the best cut on album is maybe one of the very best songs of the Osbourne era, and that's the progressive sort of rock opera style masterpieces, Spiral Architect. You know, you can hear the Who influence on this. It's got string arrangements. It's absolutely brilliant. I think they made this at some haunted house or something. There's a great picture in the inner sleeve of them looking really spooky. I'll just get it out. Which used to be in the gatefold vinyl. I love that. It's got them kind of overlaid and looking all ghostly. So this goes platinum. They play the California Jam with Purple. You know, the Riding High. I'm not sure what the UK chart placing on that is. It's number 11. I think Paranoid made number 1. Master Rally was 4. Volume 4, I think it was about 7 or 8. So, a big band. So, things start to tail off for them on the next album. This Only Goes Gold. There's kind of eruptions in the band. I think people are maybe getting turned off by some of the experimentation. We had this album when I was a kid. We had it with the Paranoid. Always preferred this album. Its reputation has just grown in stature. I think this may edge out Sabbath Bloody Sabbath and Master Reality as their greatest achievement. It is Sabotage, 1975. Opens with Hole in the Sky. Brilliant sort of bluesy swing on this one. Little instrumental, Don't Start Too Late. Then it goes into one of the most innovative, important heavy metal tracks ever written, Symptom of the Universe. Basically, if you're wondering where thrash metal gets its sounds from, where a band like Diamond Head would get an Am I Evil type of riff, well, Am I Evil, and Metallica would copy that, it's Symptom of the Universe. Then it finishes, side one finishes one of their great epics, Megalomania. I think Venom covered this Primeval album, I think. Brilliant track, just really epic with an amazing ending. Then side 2 open with The Thrill of It All, brilliant album track with a really cool Iommi riff, and then a really good sort of jolly middle section, kind of a bit more major. Then you got Superstar. They used to come out to this on the last tour. I love this. It's got a choir, it's instrumental, it's just genius. Really, really good. Then probably the one track I'm not that fussed on is Am I Going Insane? Again, it's sort of like Looking for Today, but I really like Looking for Today. It's like a poppy sort of major type of melody, but it never quite did it for me. Then it finished with The Writ, again, them ranting about their management situation. I love this track. It's got a great Aussie vocal, like, just the chords are really powerful, and Ozzy's just right up there. By this point, Ozzy's singing style, when he went solo, he could tend to sort of use that more slightly whiny, nasally tone that he has. But here, he's kind of reining that back, and he's got a more guttural element to his singing, and it works really well. So that's probably my favourite album. So the reputation of that's gone up, so it's kind of 6. Most people would say they did 6 classic albums on the trot, and although I'm not as fussed with some of those albums, I wouldn't disagree with that. Again, the band produced Sabotage, and it's great. So I always avoided this album when I was younger. People were like, oh, Technical Ecstasy's crap. It just gets in your head that's there's no point in checking it out. And then I remember I was at college and a guy said, oh, Technical Ecstasy's good. And then later on I was giving guitar lessons to a guy and he made me a tape copy of it. So eventually I got around to getting it. I should just say these CDs I'm showing you, the Castle Communications Sanctuary reissues, quite a cool picture on the back, from 1996. I really like them. Cool album cover by Hypnosis. So what's the problem with this album? The problem with this album is it's more pop, not poppy, it's lighter. It's coming on the back of several classic albums, so if you're in that cycle where you're buying Sabbath albums at the time, you're probably like, well, I'm not into this. But on its own merits, I think it's a really good album. It opens with Backstreet Kids. Then You Won't Change Me, which has got a really cool kind of Hammond organ sound on it. It's Alright, which is a kind of ballad, which Bill Ward sings, and I really like it. Gypsy, that's a good one. All Moving Parts Stand Still, that's excellent. Not supposed to be Rock and Roll Doctor. And then one of the best haunting ballads with a beautiful Iommi acoustic part, She's Gone. Then it finishes with Dirty Women, which they seem to be playing live a lot recently, but I'm not fussed with that track. But I'd give it a 7 out of 10. It's just on a run of such strong albums. But because, like I say, you're coming off that run and it's kind of lighter in sound, at the time it probably didn't get as well received. It did eventually go gold in America, but the chart placing, I think for that was about number 28, or no, in the 30s, I'm not sure. I think Sabotage was 28, so the sales are starting to go down. I'm not sure what their UK placement was. Difficult times in 1976, music starting to change. So there's probably an 18-month gap on this next one. Again, this was an album I avoided, and then the person, I got a tape copy of it by the same person who did Technical Ecstasy. So when I did this, part of them doing now, I dug out my CD and I've given it a really good listen because I wanted to kind of analyse it properly, because I feel I've overlooked it just because it's Never Say Die. So again, I think what's weird with this album, it's a mixture of going lighter but having a lot of crazy experimental elements that I think people, turn people off. It starts off with Never Say Die, which is a good rocker. They made Top of the Pops with this, which is quite interesting. So even though they're kind of going into a lull, they're still on Top of the Pops, and I think that's going to have an impact, because Motorhead are on Top of the Pops at the same time, then DC will be, and then you get your New Wobbum. So about 18 months before New Wobbum, Sabbath are on, setting the stall out, or the scene. Johnny Blade's next, which has kind of got a spooky riff. Again, Ozzy's starting to kind of sound more like he's singing his solo stuff. But I quite like it. Then Junior's Eyes. Now my comment on this was more like an Ozzy solo track, especially the chorus melody. If you listen to the chorus melody on that, it's very like the kind of thing Ozzy would sing, I think, in his solo stuff. Again, probably a 6 out of 10 track. I quite like it. Then you got A Hard Road. I really like this track. It's catchy. It's got a great sort of harmony line. very sort of, quite commercial metal, but I do really good. Then Shockwave's next. I think that's me least favourite track. It's got a really jazzy middle, very jazzy, but it doesn't do it for me. Air Dance, this has got more jazz on it. Don Airey does keyboards on this, and he's doing loads of kind of, I don't know, if you imagine the end of Magical Mystery Tour, the piano there, it's like that kind of jazzy Dorian mode. It's interesting, 6 out of 10. By this point, Iommi, which he started on Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, he's starting to multi-track guitar lines. Actually, it goes back to volume 4, that, but he is doing a lot of multi-tracking. Next track's my favourite on the album, Over to You. This is kind of more like a Uriah Heep kind of track, really, and it predates a track like Walk Away off the Heaven and Hell album. It's kind of commercial hard rock, but it's really catchy, it works really well. Then Breakout's next, which is a crazy kind of jazzy brass instrumental. That sounds like a cop theme, and I do like it. That's quite cool. And then Swinging the Chains, the last track, which isn't very melodic, but Bill Ward sings in it. It's quite heavy, and I quite like it. So I do think it is the weakest album of the Ozzy era, sort of the finish on a low, but it's worth checking out. It's definitely a 6 out of 10, maybe 6.5. So the last two albums, they do tail off. Obviously after this, there'll be a gap of albums, I'm guessing about 2 years or 18 months. Ronnie Dio comes in, and then Sabbath are in Continuum till 83. They do Heaven and Hell Mob Rules. If you watch my Ronnie Dio retrospective video on my other channel, which is also in the playlist at the bottom of this, you'll hear me talk about those albums. But I kind of see Sabbath kind of going up to 83 really, because Ian Gillan obviously joins for Born Again. But what I mean is, like I said before, it's all in continuity. Ozzy goes, they look for a singer, and so on. After the Born Again, there is that big gap. It's supposed to be a solo album that Tony Iommi does for the Seventh Star, but then he has to call it Black Sabbath featuring Tony Iommi. And then you go into the Tony Martin era, of which there is some good stuff. It's just, it's quite popular in Europe. That's quite popular with fans of power metal. Then Dio comes back. Dehumanizer, he goes again, Tony Martin comes back. I think most people agree the Forbidden album's really poor. Later on, they do the Heaven and Hell, the Devil You Know album, which I really like. Dio dies, and Ozzy comes back and they do 13. For me, the 13 album, 6 out of 10. It was great having him back, but it just didn't do it for me. It didn't have that sort of thing that, say, Angel of Retribution, how when Priest came back, or Maiden's resurgence. Maybe they left it a bit too late. But there's some really good stuff. Like, it doesn't dip. It doesn't do an injustice to the band. It just, by that point, I think he can't get as much out of Ozzy. So I think that's what Sabbath did. I think the lyrical influence of H.P. Lovecraft, Dennis Wheatley. What was the other one? Hammer Horror, those elements coming in from the late 60s into Geezer's lyric writing, combined with Tony Iommi's accident and him having to adapt his guitar playing, led to the birth of the sound. And also the technology, by 1970, things can get a little heavier because technology's better than it was in 1967. But Sabbath are really heavy. The concept of metal probably takes more fruition with their other Birmingham band, Judas Priest. But there's no doubt the Osborne era of Sabbath's a classic. And I hope you've enjoyed this. Remember, please share and subscribe, and I'll see you again soon. Cheers, bye.